Stacey Dales joins us now from NFL Network. Stacey, thank you so much for coming on with us today. I mean, I know that I'm not the skillful interviewer that Rich is, but I'll try to hold the chair down. A lot of stress on me right now, Stacey.
There's the better half. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, we know that. That's already established, right?
That's obvious.
What are you hearing about the Bears, Stacey? Let's just make it that simple.
Well, first of all, I apologize for the aesthetics. I'm in my hotel room, and I just came from availability. I'm at the Combine in Indianapolis right now, and I'm trying to figure out where to look on my camera here. Suzy, I spent a considerable amount of time with Ryan Poles, the general manager, yesterday for our one-on-one. And as you know, in this business, we're told, hey, you got a time limit, you got to stick to the time. And I wasn't given a time limit. So I opted to go for a good 6 minutes with the GM because I think it's the biggest story. When we talk about all these quarterbacks, and it's really going to be kind of an interesting draft in terms of where these top caliber elite performers fall. And he has a quarterback to figure out himself in Justin Fields. And so it was a really good in-depth conversation. And I do have some takeaways, but I would probably like to see where you'd like to go with those.
Well, I'm curious about what you think. Number one, he says he's coming there with an open mind, but does he really have an open mind?
Well, I think you have to when you don't have a lot of picks right now. The Bears, they don't have a ton of capital in this year's draft. They can get more capital, as we saw last year with the first overall pick. It's very rare, as you know, to have back-to-back first overall picks. You have to be open-minded. But I also think when you do have a scenario where if you are oddly drafting at the top of the draft in consecutive seasons, you're going to have to make a move at some point, right, to better your team with the first overall pick. And basically, when I asked him, can you not use that pick? I mean, basically saying to him, Ryan Poles, how could you not draft a quarterback after last year trading it away? And yes, it was an incredible, masterful trade. They acquired a number of draft picks from the Carolina Panthers. They also sit at 9 in this year's draft, and they got the first overall pick this year. And, basically told me it would have to be the right quarterback to take a quarterback at number 1. And he would have to be a can't miss guy. But I think we all understand, as we've seen historically, you can see quarterbacks be taken in the top 10 and be misses. Now, here's what I would say about Poles. He spent 13 years in Kansas City. He was a part of, the Brett Veach group and that brought in Patrick Mahomes, who fell in love with this generational talent when he was very young, even before his days at Texas Tech. It was a long process, and that's what Poles talked to me about, the process and how they understood the talent was there, and it was remarkable talent. When you consider the offense he played in, he threw the ball quite a bit at Texas Tech. Patrick Mahomes did, but it was the character that they became really linked to. And so my question is, when you think about Caleb Williams, you think about Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, you go through the list, which character are they falling in love with? And does that happen to be the guy everybody thinks they're taking in Caleb Williams?
And do you feel like the relationship with Justin Fields is reparable? It just seems like there's such a great degree of mistrust now from the quarterback back to the team.
Well, when you scrub your team, your NFL team, from your social media, which Justin Fields did, and he basically said the reason he did it is because he didn't want any work distractions while he was off on his own time, essentially, or vacation or whatever he's doing in his personal time. I think that's significant. And I also think that if I were interviewing a general manager and they knew their guy was their guy, would they not come out and tell me that? I really like Ryan Poles. I think he's been extremely accessible. I think he's extremely smart. He's done some really nice things with the roster. Their draft last year was outstanding, especially their second round defensive picks. But if that's my guy, and they kind of did this last year, Suze. Last year, when they had the first overall pick, they were sort of all in on Justin Fields. We haven't heard that. So I don't know if it's reparable. I don't know if it's something that could be mended if it doesn't work out. What I do know is they need a substantial amount of capital if they're going to trade Justin Fields. That's going to be important in how much they get and how those conversations sort of parlay themselves over the next few weeks.
What do you think it would take?
Really, man, I've thought about this over and over. Look what they got from Carolina for that first pick, knowing how many teams need quarterbacks. I think it would take picks next year, and I think it would take another pick in the year after that, and I think it would take a substantial amount of capital in this year's draft. I'm actually more inclined to believe, Suzy, that they will trade away their 9th pick overall, but let's say they don't. Let's say they draft like Caleb Williams and one of these tackles, because the tackle, I don't know if I've ever seen a class of tackles this deep. You know, what if they fell in love with Alt or Fashanu or somebody like that to add to the opposite side of their offensive line with Darnell Wright, who they took in the first round last year? What if they did that? Imagine they took Neighbors, or they found a receiver that they loved and took at 9. I mean, there's so many Odunze, like there's so many possibilities for them, but it would take an incredible amount of capital to trade the first pick. I think they're going to use it, and I think they're going to draft a quarterback.
And should they use it, and should they draft that quarterback, what's the right fit for Justin Fields?
Justin Fields around the league. I mean, a lot of people talk about Atlanta, right? Because the opportunity's there, new coaching regime, it would be a fresh start for him. When you think about him kind of returning to his roots, that might be appealing. I've heard, a number of different possibilities when you consider teams that are quarterback needy right now. I just think it has to be a fresh start for him and a fresh start for the team. So I think a new staff in place would be the right direction to go. But you have to look at 3 years in the NFL. How many wins has he had? Where would that stand on your roster? He improved, as Brian Poles told me yesterday, improved in terms of his approach at the line of scrimmage and his ability to read and process and react. I would almost go back. It's been 3 years in the NFL. Who liked him then, and where are they now?
Stacey Dales joins us now on the Rich Eisen Show. Suzy Shuster in for Rich Eisen. You talked about his experience in Kansas City, Poles' experience there, and looking at Mahomes. And people are talking about Caleb like he is that generational talent. But in a conversation with Louis Riddick yesterday, he also mentioned that Jaden Daniels, to him, the gap is closing. And I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on that.
Well, I think Jaden Daniels had a monster season. And when you win the Heisman Trophy, there's a reason you do it. Caleb Williams won a Heisman Trophy. Like this is, to me, it comes down to the character element. I think the most interesting thing that I've heard in all the GM pressers that I sat at, right? So if you think about the combine, and you know this, Suzy, there are like 10 podiums, and every team goes to a podium, their GM and their head coach. I could probably name you 8 different GMs that talked about quarterbacks and how character is critical. And I think it's in large part, I don't know if I've heard that many talk about the inner makings of the quarterback. We talk about all the arm talent. We talk about the accuracy. The ability to process is always something. Ask Kurt Warner about that, right? Like he has some fascinating takes on it. But it's Brock Purdy just went to a Super Bowl. And I can tell you, having covered that Niners team, that they fell in love with him during the draft process. Remember talking to Brian Griese, their quarterbacks coach, and he wanted them to draft Brock Purdy, and they took him in with the very last pick. If he had have gone as an undrafted rookie free agent, they were concerned that he was going to fall to a different team through the free agency process. So they took him with the last pick in the draft. They knew, they felt it, they loved his character, they loved his toughness. And I also thought it was really interesting to listen to the head coach of the Bears, Matt Eberflus, yesterday. His number one thing, the first thing he said was leadership, but then situational football, third down, red zone, stuff like that. 2-minute drill. Can you win the fourth quarter? So Justin Fields has struggled. I mean, he's turned the ball over more in the fourth quarter than any quarterback since he entered the league 3 seasons ago. So all of those things add up to me like they're going to draft one. To answer your question, is it Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams? Cole said he's got these crazy angles that he can throw on, and he can do some of these things like Patrick Mahomes. He made that comparison to me, but they have to fall in love with the character. And we saw what happened with Brock Purdy and the Niners when it came to that.
And that's why, as you said, character matters so much. I mean, it's been some time since I covered college football, and I've never covered pro football. But in getting to know these players and watching as they went through the combine and talking to a lot of people, feeding rich information on who these different kids are, character matters. And I think that could be a question mark with Caleb Williams, where people just don't feel like he's a known entity. And that's why that time at the combine is so important with these interviews and what have you. Is there any feeling from you that coaches are either disappointed or definitely not surprised, but would have liked to have seen him throw out there?
Yeah, this is Suzy. I love this debate, because any player in the NFL that you talk to that thinks that guy's going number one, they'll be like, don't throw. You shouldn't do any of that stuff. Bryce Young didn't last year, which I was disappointed in, because I watched Anthony Richardson, and Anthony was in CJ Stroud. And I take a very unbiased approach in my reporting with all 32, but I'm allowed to have favorites, right? I fell in love with Anthony Richardson, and I fell in love with CJ Stroud. Those are my two. Will Levis was so intense, really awesome guy. Bryce Young, such a sweetheart. But those are my two guys, and they threw. And when I watched CJ Stroud, I watched him at the combine last year, Suze. He walked around with a football. I mean, you're watching these guys for about 3 hours out there at Lucas Oil Stadium. He had like my water bottle. He had this bottle. This was his football. He didn't let it out of his grip. I mean, and does that mean anything? Maybe not. But to me, as somebody like who was obsessed with basketball growing up, and I wanted to sleep with my basketball, and I just played basketball whenever I could, he's a junkie. And so he goes and he's like the offensive rookie of the year in the NFL under DeMeco Ryans. So I do think he slung the ball, if that's a word, all over the place. And yeah, they're not throwing to their guys, but it really is cool to see them throw. So I really wish I could have seen Caleb Williams throw. It's something where like I watched all the quarterbacks throw and not Bryce Young last year. Yeah. And I was kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like, gosh, I wish I had seen Bryce Young throw last year at the combine.
Yeah, and it makes you feel a little bit like, what am I missing here? I love the fact that he walked around with that. That's swag, and that's showing you he really cares. And part of being there is to show who you are. So I'm with you. I think it's kind of crazy not to. Curious about the name that you think is going to shock the combine.
Oh my gosh. It's so hard because I'm not through the process of meeting them all. So how it works is this morning I was with all of the defensive lines. So defensive tackle, edge, linebackers. It changes every day. Like the quarterbacks talk on Friday and then they perform Saturday. I think the O linemen are with the running backs are Saturday and they go Sunday. So they talk the day before, and I develop these unbelievable feelings like Laiatu Latu. I'm obsessed with this guy out of UCLA. I mean, we know his story. Is he going to test off the charts? I'm not sure about that. But my point is like you meet these players. It was last year was one for me was Nolan Smith, who, was at Georgia, and he just had an incredible combine. It was unreal. You kind of fall in love with the character makeup of some of these guys. So I have to go through that process. I am anxious to hear from all the quarterbacks, whether it be Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy or Michigan guy, and the way he ran. They were able to run the ball, throw the ball, and how he managed the game and how that translates to the NFL. But I want to know the guy. I want to know the player. So when I think about who's going to test off the charts, I still need to know a little bit more about their drive and their ambition. And you just don't know. Like, I just left a conversation with Chop Robinson, and he's one of the big edges, and he'll go high in the draft. And like, he thinks he's going to blow people away. He wants to run like a 4.4. This is an edge rusher. So it's hard to answer that just yet. It's a little too early in the week, but on Sunday, I could give you probably my top 5.
I love the backstories. I mean, Troy Polamalu back in the day when I was covering USC, his backstory was so spectacular, and he went to the combine, and I think everyone fell in love with him just because of his earnesty and his sweetness and just, I don't even think earnesty is a word, by the way. I may have just made that one up, but you know what I mean? I mean, sometimes that's part of it. And for people like us who really love the backstories, that's when some of these players can go up. They can find their way ascending the ladder in GM's opinions just because of who they are as a character. What's your favorite backstory that you have coming in this week?
I couldn't agree more. So I'm going to tell you, not to give a spoiler, but I'm going to open the show tomorrow if my producer gives me the green light on Latu. And, this is a guy who suffered a neck injury at Washington, and he's probably the most polished edge rusher that we're going to see in terms of his technique. I mean, he is extremely skilled coming off the edge. And so he injures his neck, and they declare him basically to retire from football. And he has to get a neck fusion surgery. So he gets, and I just talked to him off to the side, which is golden. And he gets this surgery, and they say, you're never playing football again. He's like, why? And he kind of answered it today, like maybe they thought there was too much risk as a program to have him go back out there. So he's like, I'm going to go play rugby. 2 months later, Suzy, he goes and he plays rugby in Seattle. He was so good that the MLR, I think it's called, Major League Rugby team, there in Seattle, caught wind of it. They brought him in for a workout. They wanted him so badly, they offered him a contract, but he loved football so much because he was playing rugby tackling. You know how violent rugby is. I mean, it's a violent sport. And by the way, he was the 8 man, which is like the star of their trench type players. And he declined because he's like, I hope I'm not wasting their time, but I love football so much. So he goes to UCLA, and he's a superstar again. He gets cleared to play 2 years later by Dr. Watkins, the famous doctor who does all of the NFL players in Major League, whatever, it's baseball, NBA, hockey. Like, this guy is incredible. He gets cleared to play. He's going to be one of the top picks in this year's draft. He's an absolute technician. Ask Daniel Jeremiah about him. And I just think that his story brought me to tears because of how much he loves football. I wrote a quote down that I'm going to share, and I forget what the actual quote is, but he writes down in every journal, like, basically, this could be your last. This could be your last time, because you never know when it's going to be taken away, whatever it is that you love in life. And so he's just got a great story, and I just can't wait to tell it tomorrow. And when we're on air and we start, and your hubby is going to be leading the charge for us on the network with DJ in the booth, and I'll be down on the field, and I can't wait.
Oh, he loves working with you. He just cannot wait. Stacey Gels joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. Before we leave, I want to ask you about Caitlin Clark and what it's like for you, who, your name is in the rafters, your years with the WNBA, and to see the attention on her right now. What is that like for you?
Phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I was just asked by somebody here what my thoughts about her. She's obviously very advanced. She's put Iowa completely on the map and given rise to what should already have been like this global, like Lisa Bluter, the coach. Like, she's just brought so much to this program. She separates so well, Suzy, and she moves about the basketball like a pro player. And that, to me, is what distinguishes her. She is so crafty. I mean, she's a good passer. She can do everything. She's a pure scorer. But the way she plays the game, it's just such a draw, and you want to watch her. And I think she deserves all of her success, just like anybody that works that hard would. But her ability to separate, her range, and her ability as a pure scorer, it's going to be fun to watch her at the next level.
Is she the best ever, you think?
I can't say she's the best ever, because there have been too many in their time that were the best ever. Diana Taurasi is the greatest competitor I've ever faced. Her will to win is astonishingly incredible. When you think of like Patrick Mahomes, and he just wins, like it's incredible. Like, Taurasi has that. So is Caitlin Clark going to go win WNBA championships? Has she won multiple titles? Like, there's so many good ones along the way. It's hard to say she's the best ever, but right now, generationally, at this time, Yeah, of course.
Last question for you. The court storming. What's your take on that?
It's problematic. It's really problematic because I was watching that Duke game. I believe it was Duke, right? Wake Forest and Duke. I watched that game and because I was getting ready to leave for the combine, and to see a guy get hurt, or I think Caitlin got run over on
She did.
a recent game. Yeah, I saw that too.
By somebody holding a phone, by somebody looking at their screen and not living in the moment, which is so insane.
And it's just unfortunate that, as you know, like it always takes one to ruin it for everybody. But that's what happens. It takes one bad question to make a coach disgruntled for life, right?
No kidding. And you don't want to be the one asking the bad question.
No. And I love college sports. I love that they're so pumped, but let's find a different way, because this isn't working when we're injuring players and could jeopardize their future on the court as they represent the school that just won. So I'm hoping that they put some parameters around it.
Stacey, you are the best. Thank you so much. Have the best time. We can't wait to watch you all weekend long. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Suze. You rock. And I get to hug your husband at a production meeting today. So there you go.
Give him a squeeze for me, please. Have fun, enjoy, and thanks again for your time. It's so invaluable. You tell the best stories.
My pleasure.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.